Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for logging in and joining us today for another in a great series of planning webinars that Cornerstone Wealth has put on this year. And today we're going to spend some time going over some important information as it pertains to long-term care planning. My name is Ed Wood. I'm a partner with the firm here, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Jeremy Grant. Jeremy is also a partner with the firm. At Cornerstone, we spend a tremendous amount of time working with clients from a planning perspective. Really, everything that we do is driven by planning. Some of it retirement planning, some of it estate planning. There's many types of planning that we get involved in, but mostly it's how to accumulate and to manage wealth at the same time. And while we're looking at the accumulation phase and the distribution phase for clients, it's really important for us to also focus in on the protection phase of this wealth. And one of the largest burdens on assets that clients have could be a long-term care event or an extended healthcare event, I'll call it. And that could really be devastating for most people. And many of you out there probably have either family members or people that you know who have been through a long-term care situation and have had to come up with money to pay for costs. And it really could have been, like I said, devastating to their financial plan or picture going forward. So today we'd like to cover a few areas that we feel are important for you to understand around this long-term care planning. So we'll start with what is long-term care, just some generalities about the actual long-term care itself. We're going to talk about the activities of daily living that actually trigger the benefits for long-term care. And then we'll get into types of care options that are out there, and then how to pay for that care. A little bit about Medicare and the state of the long-term care insurance industries, and then we'll wind up with some long-term care cost statistics. So Jeremy, why don't you start things off for us and cover a little bit about long-term care and the types of care that are available?
Sure. Thanks, Ed, and welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. So what is long-term care? In reality, it means it's a different answer to different people. It's a huge universe of space that occupies a retiree's, mindset. And, if you think about it, long-term care can be not that long-term in nature at all. It could go from anywhere from, you fall. I've had clients that fall and break their knee playing softball, church league softball, and need a couple months worth of rehabilitation, and assistance from a long-term care facility or even in their home. And then they're back, to their normal daily activities. I've used the example before of my grandmother. She had early onset dementia and needed care almost the remainder of her life, some of which the last 8 or 9 years of her life, it was 24-hour around the clock care. So, how the reality of long-term care for each one of us, the experience that we and our family members have with needing long-term care is very diverse. So, and there's different, obviously, ways to pay for that. And that's kind of what we're going to go over today. So Ed mentioned trigger events. So you have a long-term care policy in place. What actually takes that from a policy to an actual a benefit? So what does it take, or what is the trigger activities that causes that long-term care policy to start paying its benefits? So there's 6 activities of daily life, and you can see them right there. They're all pretty self-explanatory: eating, bathing, dressing yourself, toileting, transferring. So if it's moving from the bedroom to the living room, or just getting out of bed, or whatever the case may be, transferring, continence, those are all activities of daily life. And if a doctor will say that you can't perform 2 of those 6, then your long-term care policy will start to pay its benefits. Here's a statistic that I really find amazing because, we all purchase different types of insurance, homeowners, car insurance, other types of things. And, obviously the premiums and what we pay for those. And when we all think about insurance in general, it comes down to what's the probability that we'll need to use those. So, if you look at, again, homeowners insurance, what's the probability that your house is going to burn down? Probably pretty slim chances. But if you look at long-term care, as you can see here, 65, if you're turning 65 years old today, there's almost a 70% chance that you'll need some type of long-term care. So, I'm not sure how many people are on the call here today, but, there's 10 people in a room, 7 of us will need some type of long-term care. So again, when we think about prioritizing our insurance needs, we feel that this is a pretty high priority, obviously, because of the propensity for us to need it. Not only to mention, if you look at the second part of that sentence, 20% of the people that do need long-term care will need it for 5 years or longer. And as you all know, with medical expenses in general, but if you look at some of the costs, which we'll look at in further slides of what it actually costs to pay for long-term care, nursing homes, things like that, it's very expensive. And if you accumulate that over a 5-year period, like Ed said, it can certainly, hinder someone's ability to, pay for retirement for the rest of their life. So, but like I said, it's certainly a big need. There's a high probability that we will all need it at some point, and it's just really a matter of how much we need and when we'll need it. So there's different places or types of long-term care options, and what we did was kind of start with in-home health care, which is really, kind of the smaller amount of need going up all the way to traditional nursing homes and things like that. So you have in-home health care, you have adult day health care, assisted living facilities, nursing home facilities, which is kind of what we all really think of. The long-term care encompasses much more than that. Independent living facilities, and then continuing care facilities. So we're going to take a look at each one of those. So in-home care, and I think it's only natural that we all want to stay in our homes as long as we can. So nobody wants to just all of a sudden go into a nursing home, and that's, that's obvious. So, and we'll look at some of the statistics around that coming up. But, home health care, that's where the majority of people start their long-term care journey. Most of that, at least at the beginning, is given by friends and family most often than not, volunteers, and even paid professionals. So, you look at homemaker services, which is, really paid people that are trained to do what they do. So, if you look again, kind of at the long-term spectrum, our journey that we take on long-term care, typically we all start out with maybe our children or something like that taking care of us. But as we all progress in age and progress in long-term care needs, the skill that's required to produce those needs and that care grows. So, at some point, it's actually bringing in paid professionals that come in and help us with those six activities, of daily living. So, and again, it progresses along that spectrum. So you look at home health aides, those that allow us to stay in our home, allow us to stay as independent as we possibly can, which is all what we want to do. But again, as we all progress and progress in different ways, there's going to be a higher and higher need of quality care. And so in-home health care really allows us to, and that's something we discuss with all our clients. And when we're talking about specific policies, is making sure that we have home health care really be a proponent, a big part of the policies, that we write, and make sure that that's there, because like we'll see in further slides, that's really the majority of where we see long-term care needs made. So, so what does that cost? Obviously, there's a cost to really everything. If you look at so far in this year, in 2020, the average cost of homemaker services and home health aid in North Carolina is just shy of $4,000. So, and we always talk about this with clients as well. Sometimes, okay, $4,000 a month, that isn't that bad, but a lot of our clients are still married or, still have other needs other than just home health care. So that $4,000 a month expense, if you're still married and have another spouse, that other spouse still needs to live, still needs to eat, take care of themselves, utilities and things like that. So, it's not just a standalone cost. It's in addition to really all the other costs that we see in living. And Ed will go over this in future slides as well. But the question with all this is, how are we going to pay for this? Do we private pay? Do we pay out of pocket? We'll go over some of the numbers soon. But I mean, to pay $4,000 a month on top of all the other expenses that we all see just in normal day living, obviously can add up pretty quickly. And we haven't even started talking about nursing homes and things like that. So, and then there's veterans, the VA certainly provides things. We'll go over Medicaid and home services there as well. So the next one is independent living. So a lot of these are also called senior apartments. And for a lot of you in the Lake Norman area, there's several in this area. I think there's one over near Huff High School and things like that. But, and these are facilities for people that don't need around the clock care. And in most cases, they don't need really any care. They just need someone there in case they do. So if you look at senior apartments, it allows you to be completely independent in some cases. But like I said, if you do need care and things like that, it is, close by, but at a cost. So, again, if you look at the average cost, which can, we have clients all over the country, so we see this quite often, but, a client in California is certainly going to pay more for an independent living facility than someone here locally. But on average, the average cost is between $1,500 to $3,500 a month. And a lot of these facilities, as well as other facilities, a lot of them require upfront fees. So it's almost like a membership at a country club or something where, there's monthly dues, which again is $1,500 to $3,500 a month, but there's also these buy-in fees, which we'll go over in a bit as far as how much they can be, but they can be substantial, so again, looking at long-term care and ways to pay for this is very important, because this is not by any means a cheap thing for people. Daycare. So kind of just what it says, so if you kind of think with your kids growing up, daycare, I know as a parent, a lot of what I value out of daycare for my kids is giving me a break. And that's kind of what adult daycare does for the caregivers of our clients who need this level of care. So again, we're not talking about nursing homes. We're not talking about things like that, but it's a place where, a client can be put for maybe a couple hours a week, a couple hours a day, or whatever the case may be, in order to, one, just give their caregivers a break, which in a lot of cases are their family and friends. And in many cases are doing this for free, out of the love of their heart. And as you all know, a lot of you are probably taking care of some of your, elderly parents. So, it's not only emotionally and physically draining, but it just, it takes a lot out of you. So one, some of these types of things, again, most of the time they're not overnight. It's a place where it's almost like a community driven center, whether through the YMCA or something like that. But it provides, assistance and supervision throughout certain periods of the day, again, giving caregivers a break, but, it still leaves that person with some sense of, supervision from a health standpoint, therapeutic services. So there's lots of times, I know the YMCA here in Lake Norman, I think they do swimming classes and things like that, and just social activities in general. I think throughout COVID-19, we've all realized that being socially engaged is also, important, especially at that stage of our life as well. So that's what adult daycare does. Assisted living facilities. So we're kind of working our way, across the spectrum. So again, we started at home health care. Now we're to assisted living facilities. So this is actually a facility where you would actually live. At this point, you don't need high levels of care, but you do need some assistance. So again, we go back to those 6 daily activities of life. The chances are at this stage of the game, you're not able to do all of those. Probably not able to do more than a couple of them. So again, eating, bathing, dressing, transportation, medicine. I know I have a lot of clients that, they're in good health, but they take a lot of medications, and just really keeping up with those is a big deal. And in a lot of cases, forgetting medication is, produces a lot of issues there as well. So, and it could come down to just even laundry and housekeeping, again, social and recreational activities. I think that's very important, keeping our mind sharp as long as we can. That's, and a big part of that isn't just eating and bathing. A part of that is, having social interactions and things like that. So, and as you'll see with all these types of facilities, it's a wide gamut as far as, you kind of get what you pay for, in other words. So, a lot of these are studio, apartment style places of residence, but you can have 1, 2, 3 plus bedrooms. One of the main things about these types of facilities are physicians actually come to the facility. So again, going back to home health care on that end of the spectrum, very rarely do doctors make house calls anymore. So, under that scenario, if you did need that type of, if you were in your home and needed to see a physician, in some cases, you would have to actually, drive many miles to see that physician, which is obviously a big deal, not only for the person, but also the caregivers and things around that. And nurses and CNAs are on site 24/7. So again, these are people that don't need 24/7 care, but they need the ability to access it in a short period of time, 24/7. So something assisted living facilities accommodate. So what does that cost? And like I said, it varies quite a bit. So, I mean, again, if you're in California, New York, or some of these other states, you're going to be certainly paying a lot more than a lot of the clients that we see in this area. But, on average, North Carolina, I mean, we're pushing the national average. So the average cost of an adult daycare is around $4,000, or assisted living is around $4,000 a month. And again, we're just coming in just under that. So in 2019, the average North Carolinian paid around, $3,600, $3,700 a month for that level of care. So this is kind of what I think most clients, when they talk about long-term care, this is kind of what they gravitate towards. But like we've seen, most of us want to stay in our home as long as we can. But when you get to this level of the care that you need, again, it's 24-hour access. You may not need 24-hour care, but you need it in a close proximity, to where you are. So these are people that they're no longer in their home or in their community. They're actually in a nursing home facility. A lot of those are skilled care, which the definition between, just normal care and skilled nursing care, and Ed will hit on some of this with some of the Medicare and Medicaid discussion, but, it can vary quite widely. So, and, there's meals provided, activities, again, help with daily living. Again, there are those 6 activities that we all need to perform, and it's all done with supervision. Nurses and CNAs are on site at all times in these facilities. So, like I said, hopefully you're not at the point where you're needing a nurse at your bedside every single moment, but when you're at this stage of your need of care, you're needing that level of care somewhere close to you at all times. So, and then, as far as duration, as far as timeline, is how long we're in there, there's a lot of flexibility there too. So, I mean, there's short-term nursing home stays, and then there's long-term, obviously, options as well. And, some of the short-term can almost act like an adult daycare in an advanced stage, where you're providing that respite care for some of your caregivers, but it's a place where they can't just say, hey, mom or dad, we'll be back, in a few hours, just hang out here. So at this stage of the game, again, you need, 24/7 care, but doesn't mean you need it for the rest of your life. So there can also be temporary or periodic stays in a nursing home. And then obviously there's long-term options as well. So what does a nursing home cost? And this is really where we start, ramping up and really looking at protecting your assets. Because like Ed said, if you look at a semi-private room in a nursing home today, and again, it varies geographically, but on average, which means a lot of them are more expensive based on the definition of averages. The average is $247 a day, or over $7,500 a month. And that's for a semi-private room. So again, under that situation, I mean, you have a roommate, which you may not want at that stage of, of the game, but a private room actually costs almost $1,000 a month more on average. So if you look at that, a private room averages $280 a day, or $8,500 a month. And I just know from experience in dealing with a lot of my clients, those are averages, and they can go up quite a bit. I have a client in River Landing up in Colfax, North Carolina, and she needs quite a bit of care. She's paying a little over $14,000 a month right now for room and board, so to speak. And as you can all imagine, you can go through, regardless of the size of your portfolio, when you're hitting it up for $14,000 a month just for the facility cost. Obviously, you're going to deplete those assets pretty quickly. A continuing care facility. So this is actually what River Landing is. I mentioned that as a facility, not to plug them, but just one that I've had a lot of dealings with. But it is a continuing care facility, so which is just that by definition. It's a continually graded level of care. So again, the average person moves into a continuing care community. At that point, they don't need around-the-clock, 24/7 hour care. The one River Landing actually has a golf course, so when people move in there, it's almost more of a social aspect. They do have medical assistance and things like that. They have people housekeeping and things like that that can help them. But at that stage of the game, they're very much still independent. But as we all age and we all progress, we work our way up that spectrum. And what we see is we need higher and higher levels of care, as we continue to get older. So what these continuing care facilities do, in a lot of cases, they're giant facilities, and they have different almost campuses throughout their locations. But again, you'll move into one where you're very independent. You might not need hardly any care. But again, as we get into our 70s and 80s and on into life, we do need that level of care. And instead of having to pick up everything and move to a completely different geographic location and things like that, with these continuing care facilities, what happens is we basically just move to another wing, and you kind of progress along, as we get there. So, and as you can see there, AARP, as you mentioned, these are one of the most expensive types of facilities. One, because they're not finite. I mean, a lot of the times when people move into these, this is their last move. They're not ready to be, bedside nursing home yet, but they do need some care. So, but again, they're moving into this with the expectation that this is their last move. So that being said, it can be very expensive, one, but a lot of times, I mentioned upfront buy-in fees can be very expensive as well. So as you can see there, some of these entrance fees can run, $300,000+ to literally over $1 million. It's almost like a country club, in some of these aspects where, you buy in, you get a lifetime contract. So you're there, they can't kick you out as long as you're obviously, paying your monthly dues and things like that. But like I said, the cost of these can be very expensive. You're looking at $3,000 to $6,000 a month on top of the month of the initial buy-in fees. So certainly can, like Ed said, eat into a portfolio pretty quickly.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's great information. When I talked earlier about us being financial planners, both of us are financial planners, and we work with our clients, primarily, I would say we spend a lot of time in that the retirement income cash flow area. And as we're looking through those numbers, the discussion does come up about, what happens if this happens or if that happens? And one of the things that could happen could be a long-term healthcare event. So, we start talking about that long-term healthcare event, and we try to play out and see what would happen to the portfolio if such a thing were to happen. And realistically, most of the time, there is quite a dent put in the portfolio, and we start looking for some options of how to shift that risk, let's say, from us paying for that ourselves to maybe an insurance carrier, or maybe there's a situation where there are enough assets there to pay for such an event. But really, it all comes down to cost, and at the end of the day, the discussion does end up as to, how much is it going to be? How do we get that money? It's very expensive to take care of these types of needs. So, we've put together here, 6 ways that you could take care of some of those costs. And I'll go ahead and start with Medicare here. Sometimes we talk to clients and they tell us that, oh, well, I'll just have Medicare pay for that for me. And Medicare does pay for a lot of things. It's a wonderful benefit. But when it comes to true long-term care expenses, it doesn't really pay for that much. It pays for short-term skilled nursing care, which you would probably need at the beginning of a long-term care event. And then it pays for some hospice care, which you'd probably need at the end of that event. It doesn't pay for most things. If you look here, it says, custodial care. And Jeremy went all over the activities of daily living, and those things are not covered. So if you need assistance with any of those activities, Medicare will not pay for that. It will not pay for adult daycare. Alzheimer's and dementia care will not cover that. Now, it does cover some incidentals. If you're in one of the facilities that Jeremy talked about, you might need Medicare to still cover hospital care or doctor services or medical supplies while you're in the facility. So it really doesn't cover much, but it does cover a few things. If we drill down a little bit on what it does cover, that skilled care, it will only cover the skilled care if it takes place in a Medicare certified facility that you've entered into within 30 days of a 3-day inpatient hospital stay. And you have to have a need for physical therapy, speech therapy, other types of rehabilitative therapy in order for it to actually pay. And then when it does pay, it will only pay for up to 20 days of this care at 100%. So between day 21 and day 100, patients will have to be in a co-insurance or a co-pay situation, and the average cost out of pocket is about $170 before that Medicare will kick in. So after 100 days, however, the patient is 100% responsible. So that just shows you that, look, it's there. It's a benefit to cover some costs, but it certainly doesn't cover very much in the way of those costs. Self-funding is another way to cover, or self-insuring, however you want to say that, to cover these potential long-term care expenses. When we do the financial plan and when we do we look at our client's asset pool and we look and say, do they have enough for this situation? We test those situations. We look for risk in the portfolios. And again, long-term care situations can be a huge risk. So paying for them yourself certainly has its pluses and minuses, such as you don't have to pay any insurance premiums for long-term care insurance, which is a plus. One of the big rubs on long-term care insurance, and I'll talk about this again in a minute, but is that you could be in a situation where you pay premiums over the years and then you die and you never use the policy, the benefits. So the only people that got the benefit from your premiums over those years was the insurance company. So a lot of people have an issue with that. Some of the downsides potentially could be if you are using your existing assets, liquidating assets to cover these costs. You might need that money for future retirement income or emergency fund. It could also affect you if you're planning on leaving a legacy to your heirs, or if your planned giving is on your mind. It can affect you in those kind of ways down the road. So, if you earmark money for one thing, you may have to turn around and use it for something else. But those would be some of the downsides there of self-funding or self-insuring. But what we see in most cases that our clients that can self-insure have enough assets, substantial assets, sufficient enough to cover their retirement income needs currently and in the future, and any other giving or legacy planning that they may want to take care of. But it certainly is an option. Traditional long-term care insurance, these products have been around since the late 70s, and they are a way for you to transfer the risk of that potential liability to pay those long-term care costs to the insurance company. You're going to be able to create financial leverage by paying a smaller premium and getting a larger benefit to pay for these potential costs. The downsides, as I mentioned before, you've got to pay premiums to these policies. And as we've seen over the past, 5 to 7 years, maybe even a little bit longer, policy premiums keep going up and up and up. And I'll talk about why that's happening here in a minute. But these policies are also medically underwritten. So you have to qualify medically to be able to be underwritten. So the insurance company gets to make a decision if they want to work with you or not, or have you as a client. And then again, if you die and never used a benefit, then that may be wasted premium, so to speak. But as Jeremy mentioned, if you have homeowners insurance, you hope you never have to use it. But if you do, you're glad you had it. So this could be a similar situation here. About 10 years ago, there was some real push against the insurance industry to come up with something that would help with cost recovery in the instance that someone does pay long-term care premiums and they never use them if they die. How do we create a situation where there is cost recovery there? So the industry came out with some products that are combined life insurance and long-term care, or annuity and long-term care. And some of you may own these products out there. But those products are nice because they still allow you to shift the risk to the insurance company. And they do provide cost recovery in the form of a long-term care benefit, death benefit, or even possibly return of premium if you change your mind and you decide down the road you no longer want the product anymore. It does provide more of a stable premium structure. We haven't seen premium increases on products like this so far. So some of the downsides, a couple of the downsides of premiums, you have to pay premium just like on the traditional product. Some of the premiums could be a little higher depending on the design that you choose. And they are also medically underwritten for the most part there too. So if you do have underwriting issues, health concerns, using the combined life annuity product with long-term care could be a nice option there. You still get leverage from the standpoint of the amount you put in versus what you can use as a benefit, except it's just not medically underwritten. It's not going to be as much leverage as something that's medically underwritten, but it still might be a good option for you to try. And lastly, Medicaid as a way or a means to pay for long-term care costs. This is probably the most used way to pay for them, just based on the fact that it's there as last resort. So if you look at Medicaid, it's a state-run program. It's a low-cost option for some custodial care and some medical services, all that could be needed in a long-term care situation. And if you have low incomes or you don't have the asset pool to qualify for these other products, then Medicaid might be your only option. And that's okay. It's different than long-term care insurance. Long-term care is private insurance. And, if you can afford to pay for it and qualify for it medically, you can get it. It is more flexible than the Medicaid option. Medicaid is there to help you, but you don't get to choose necessarily. There's not a lot of choice as to, I want to go to this facility, I want this, or I want that. There are Medicaid qualified facilities, and that's what you have to do is go in there. And again, if they're providing the care and paying for it, that is an option for you. As time has passed and more people, the baby boomers are starting to get a little older, and more people are going through this long-term care stage of life, and having Medicare be the largest, Medicaid being the largest payer of a lot of these benefits, it's put a lot of strain on the states. So a number of years back, the federal government and the state government got together and created this initiative called partnership programming. So what they do is they work together. They partner up with the insurance industry, insurance carriers, and they allow people to buy a partnership qualified insurance policy for long-term care. And as long as they do that and it meets certain criteria, if they ever have to use the benefit to pay for long-term care, then the state will allow them to have a dollar for dollar asset disregard or spend down protection for the amount of the money that they had to spend from the benefit. For example, Stephanie, in this case, buys a partnership qualified policy and needs care at some point in her life. The policy pays out $150,000 of claims, and Stephanie earns an additional $150,000 over the asset level that she would otherwise have to meet in order to be eligible for Medicaid coverage. So on the previous slide, dealing with Medicaid, you also have to spend down your assets in order to financially qualify for Medicaid. So this particular program will allow you to retain an amount of assets equal dollar for dollar to what you spend in benefits through the insurance policy, over and above what you have to have qualify for Medicaid. So that does help if you have a spouse that's not in a long-term care situation, or if you would like to leave a legacy to your family. Medicaid also has something called estate recovery. After death, they reserve the right to come back and claw back from the estate amounts of money that have been spent on long-term care through Medicaid that might otherwise be sitting in the estate somewhere. So this partnership program was designed to also bypass that particular estate recovery in those certain situations. So you do have to have a policy that is designed as a partnership policy. It's very, very similar to a normal policy. We would just need to know that on the front end, or whomever's putting that together on the front end, that's what your plan is. So over the last 20 years, I would say there have been a lot of change in the long-term care industry, insurance-wise. We've seen the industry go from 15 to 20 carriers selling insurance products down to probably 2, maybe 3 or 4 today that are quality companies selling long-term care, traditional long-term care policies. More and more companies are going to a linked benefit or these combination type of policies. It's a little more cost effective for them, and it's just what the consumer really likes. So some of the things that are driving this this exit from this long-term care insurance market for the insurance carriers certainly are the low interest rate environment that we've been in, because these companies are required to set aside in reserves enough money to cover their insured obligations. And when they're setting money aside, they're setting it in very, very safe, generally government securities, in order to make sure that the money is there. They're required to do that. So if they can't make enough money to be profitable and do that, they're going to start selling off their books to other companies, and or just exiting the industry altogether. Another thing that we've seen are underwriting changes over the years. When these policies first came out, traditional policies I'm speaking of, some companies were underwriting those medically on mortality tables. Mortality tables tell the insurance carrier roughly how long a person can live. What they should have been doing, and they have started doing, not too recently, but fairly recently, is using morbidity tables. Morbidity tables are different in that they give the insurance carrier an idea of the possibility or the chances of getting certain disabilities or debilitating diseases, things that could make you have to have a long-term care event or custodial care and so forth. So as they've done that, they've created a situation where they've got a lot of policies out there that if you own these traditional policies, that because you're getting these premium increases in the mail, they can't take the policy away from you, but they can increase the premiums without they can just come along and increase the premiums. They're guarantee renewable, but they can't non-cancelable and guarantee renewable. They can't take them away, but they do reserve the right to raise a premium. So they can do it not per person, but by class. So you'll continue to see that. And one thing that we say to clients, because we get a lot of clients talking to us about the letter they've received about premiums going up, let's talk about it. The insurance carrier is going to give you some options typically to make some changes in order to keep the premium the same or lower it. But typically they don't give you all the options. So we found that calling together to the insurance carrier, doing a little homework, we've been able to enforce what you have and maybe make the premium a little more palatable. Because trying to go out today and get a new policy, it's very difficult, and you more than likely will not be able to find something as good as you have currently. So, there's been those changes. Those will continue to happen as people live longer, medical advances happen. It doesn't mean that people don't have other issues going on. So it's really important for these companies to understand this claims experience that they're having so they can properly price these products. So we've been dealing with that for several years now. And, Jeremy, I think you're going to spend a few minutes talking about just statistically how some of these changes in this environment from a cost standpoint and underwriting standpoint have affected applications.
Yeah, so certainly. So, that's the big question with any insurance is how much it costs. So if we look at 2019, the long-term care insurance policy cost, what we did was kind of data mine that. And what we found was, the average male, again, in this, everything is medically underwritten. So again, when we apply for a policy, whether or not you're even approved and at what level is all determined by, your health at the time of application. So what we did was we went and we looked at, an average male and female and combination of the two. So the initial policy started out, so they bought $164,000 worth of long-term care benefit. With most all of our policies, if not all, we always add cost of living increases to that. As we all know, medical costs are probably going higher than, much higher than inflation and much higher than most other cost of commodities and things that we buy. So this person, again, bought $164,000 worth of long-term care insurance at age 55, but by the time they reach 85, the benefit through cost of living increases has grown to $386,500. So, but in 2019, what you would have paid for that as a male is around $1,925. You can see right below that as a female, and we'll go over some of the statistics as why there's such a discrepancy there. But as you can see, for a single female at the same age, same health rating, the cost is over $3,000 a year. And again, these are annual numbers. And most carriers will give a discount for spousal, a combination for couples there. So as you see, if both couples are apply for this, the average cost was around $3,400 a year. The big thing, and one thing that kind of hit me by surprise. So if you remember one of the first slides that we looked at in talking about the probability of us needing long-term care. Again, somebody turning 65 today, there's a 70% chance that you're going to need long-term care. That's a pretty high probability. The insurance companies know that, and when they're pricing these vehicles, obviously they're going to price that accordingly. So, which means, the longer that we wait, obviously, not only the more the premium is going to be, but the higher the likelihood that you won't even be able to qualify for a policy. So, so as you can see there, if you're say 65 to 69 years old, almost a third of the people that wait that long to apply for long-term care are already to the point, based on morbidity tables, that you won't even get approved for a policy anyway. And obviously that just increases substantially. So, for people that are waiting to their 70, 75 years old to apply for a policy, at 75 years or older, I mean, the chances are better than not that you won't even be accepted for coverage. Some other statistics. So when do people buy it? Obviously we don't want our clients, and we always try to have the conversation well before obviously they're 75 plus years old. But nationally, if you look at when do people buy insurance, 76+% of the people that buy long-term care insurance are between 50 and 69 years old. So again, I think a lot of hopefully good planning is going into that, where those people are applying at the right time so that they're not at such a high risk of being denied coverage. 52% of those policies are 3-year or less in coverage. So, again, going back to that earlier slide, 20% of the people that will need long-term care need it for more than 5 years. So, and, when we get into individual policy design with individual clients, we can go over this more in detail, but, you basically buy a bucket of money, which should last a certain number of years. So you can buy 1 year's worth of long-term care coverage, or you can buy unlimited, where it basically covers you for the rest of your life. And obviously where you're at on that spectrum determines how much the premium costs. There's obviously quite a disparity there. So, but on average, the average person purchases 3 years worth or less of long-term care coverage. So when does that coverage begin? And I think it's also well worth noting, if you remember going back to the other slide, when do people start not being able to even qualify for long-term care insurance? It's when they need the long-term care coverage, so again, going back to the homeowner's insurance. I mean, if you're waiting, I think about the folks in California who are unfortunately dealing with these forest fires. It's pretty tough to get homeowners insurance if your neighborhood's on fire. So, which is the case when we're all up in our middle 70s, heading into the 80s. So, if you look at the age group from 81 on up, over 2/3 of the people that put in claims for long-term care are over 80 years old. So, which obviously under 70, it's only 4.5%. So, again, everybody's different. Everybody has a different, story there. But again, knowing when to start looking for those policies and doing it in a timely manner makes a lot of sense. One thing there you'll also see, and another reason on a previous slide why women's coverage was so much more expensive, almost 50% more, $1,900 to $3,000 a year in expenses. It's because they use it more. Women have for a long time had a longer life expectancy. Now we all have a longer life expectancy. And if you think about it, we're not always healthy up until our last day. So women, if you look at the number of people who have put in claims, 64% of those claims are from women, 36 are from men. So again, that goes into the pricing of those. So where do we all start out our long-term care journey? Again, hopefully we all start where we want to start. Heaven forbid we never need long-term care, but 51+% of the time we start out in our home. And again, when we're sitting down with our clients and going over policy design, in a lot of cases we'll add on riders there that take care of home health care with no elimination period. And again, going into definitions, we'll talk about it in individual policy design. But understanding the statistics behind th+these policies really allows us to design a policy, that makes the most sense for all of our clients. But again, 51+% of the people that start out needing some type of long-term care, it's in the home. So only 23% of us go directly from being healthy to a nursing home, which is again what a lot of people think about when they think of long-term care. But again, home health care. And even to that second point, most of us finish our long-term care journey in the home, and ending it can mean recovering from whatever that event, back to our life, or honestly, it can mean the end of our life, but in any regard, even 43% of the long-term insurance claims that are out there end those policies end their benefit in home health care as well. So very important to, again, understand the demographics of long-term care and what we're all facing. So the people that need it, again, this goes into the pricing of it and the probability that you can't even get long-term care. So, we've talked about that magic age of mid 70s plus, so 75 to 84% of people, that's 17% of those people, that's where their long-term care needs journey started. And then certainly once we get 85 plus, again, most of those are going to be women. And, that's something that we all have to take into account. But again, if you look at just the averages, it's really ramped up 75 plus. That's when we're going to start to need that care. And, and at that time, maybe have depleted some of our retirement assets. If you retire at 65 and, you draw down your retirement assets for 10, 15 years, and now you need a long-term care coverage or long-term care benefit, that's when it becomes, I think, more advantageous to have a policy. Because like I said, in that case, you may have been retired for 15, 20 years, just living normal life off retirement. So, just one quick little thing in recap, I think about all of my personal clients and all of our clients as a firm. I think all of you have done a great job of amassing the wealth that you have, putting your ducks in a row, so to speak. And, if what we do as planners is always try to stress test that, and if I look at it and say, what is the one thing that could upset the apple cart to all the planning that our clients and us together have put in place? It's not market performance. It's not the election. It's not coronavirus. It's a long-term care event. Again, going back to my grandmother who needed, almost 15 years of continual care and 8 or 9 years of literally 24 around the 7 o'clock. So I think that's why we stress on this to our clients is, this is the one area that could take all the good work that you've done and, really upset the apple cart.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hey, we'd like to open it up now for any questions, and just type them in there if you've got something on your mind, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our abilities. And while we're doing that, I guess I totally agree with Jeremy here. There's no cookie cutter solution that fits everybody. So, through the planning process and really testing your plan and looking at that modeling, cash flow modeling, we can decide, what is the need? What do we have to cover the need? How can we pay for something if we need to have some other solution outside of self-funding? But everybody's going to be in a little bit different situation. I know we spend a lot of time just putting two different products together. Sometimes it's, hey, I want to self-fund, half of my possible need, and then I'd like to maybe buy a policy with a little bit of money that I've got. So let's see. I've got a question here from Gerald. Do we have a database of continuing care facilities in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia? We don't, but that's something we can look for and certainly put out there for you. But that's a great question. I mean, I work in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, but I have quite a few clients down in the Lexington and Columbia area of South Carolina, all the way down into Florida. And I know, we're really spread out with some clients as well. So it would be a good resource, Gerald. Thank you for the question, and we'll try to get something put together. And that looks like it. So feel free to reach out to your advisor, or you can call the office and ask for Jeremy or myself. We'd be glad to help any of you in any way possible. we hate to end a meeting on a whole bunch of statistics, but those are important numbers, and nothing to memorize, but certainly just to be familiar with the chances of something happening. And if it's our job to not only manage your money, but also manage the risk around it. So that's what we're here to do. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again, hopefully sooner than later, on more of these planning concept webinars. So take care, and thank you again for your continued trust and confidence in Cornerstone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.